Karen Taylor, does it really deter crime to have surveillance cameras out there? Does it really?
I believe there are studies that show it does. There are cities that have used that effectively. Chicago, one of the studies in Chicago shows that it has led to a decrease in crime. Cape Town, South Africa shows a decline of 43% crime in the area after installing safety cameras. But even more so, even the fact that they help solve crime. And in Colombia alone, one of the attackers of my son had 16 prior arrests. And it seems to me that it's pretty reasonable to think that that man is taken off the street. He's not out there committing more crime, which in effect does deter crime.
Dan Viets, you have statistics that say surveillance cameras do not deter crime?
We do. And again, I can't recite or read them to you this evening, but if you go to keepcolumbiafree.com, you'll find all of those studies. One of the best ones was done, in fact, by staff people at the ACLU, not doing original research, but reviewing all of the considerable body of scientific research which has been done and which does exist. Again, uniformly, the conclusion, both of studies in the United States and studies done in other countries, indicates that cameras used on public streets and sidewalks have virtually no impact on either the crime rate or the rate at which crimes are solved. Now, in the incident at the parking garage here, it's my understanding that the police were familiar with, indeed, as Karen said, that some of these individuals had extensive prior criminal histories. The police recognized them because they were, at least in some cases, familiar faces, and that helped. But that's often not the case. In fact, more often than not, it is not the case. The cameras simply aren't nearly as effective as one might assume.
You know, in the opening statements, Karen, you had said that there were several, within 6 hours of that horrible ordeal with Adam, who was with us here in the audience tonight, as well as other family members like Lonnie. There must not be any NASCAR going on this evening. 6 hours after the incident, there were already arrests being made. Is that correct?
6 hours after the police saw the video.
After they saw the video, I'm sorry. Is that typical?
I can't answer that question. I don't know. But I do know that without the camera, it would have nearly happened. It would not have happened so quickly.
Let me throw this out to both of you, and either one can jump. But do we know how many cameras right now, in 1 week's time, maybe videotaping? There's no tape being used anymore, I think. The video cataloging Colombia, events in Colombia, people in Colombia. Do we have any idea how many cameras in 1 week's time may be flipped on in our town? City-owned cameras.
I don't know a total number, but I do know that the new City Hall has 43 cameras inside and cameras actually on Broadway. And I do know that Boone Hospital Center has 270 cameras. So our county-owned hospital.
I don't want to interrupt, but those cameras are not, however, focused on the public streets and sidewalks, and that is a fundamentally different proposition. You know, the fact is that as Colombia's population, as development takes place, the population grows, almost by definition. That's what's happening in our city. That's why the crime rate has grown slowly, incrementally, but surely, because we have development, we have growth, population grows, and crime grows. But there is no crisis in crime in this community. In fact, the statistics in many serious categories indicate that crime peaked a couple of years ago, and crime in 2009 was considerably below what it was in 2007.
Is that one of the differing points between the two of you and the views you represent? Are there views that we do have a crime problem and someone else's view that we don't?
Right.
No one says there's not a crime problem. That is a straw man argument. I cringe every time I hear someone put up that false choice, do we have a crime? By definition, crime is a problem. Yeah, that is a false choice.
I think we'd all agree that any crime's too much crime. However,
there are citizens in Colombia right now that feel that over the last 5 to 10 years there has been an increase in crime in our fine hamlet.
Right. And I actually asked for the downtown police department to give me some crime statistics, which they have done. And one thing that's important to note about these statistics is that we want to compare apples to apples. We want to compare the same boundaries that we were looking at a period of time ago to today. So I asked for that because with the geographic policing, the boundaries of downtown have changed. And so I said, please compare apples to apples for me so that I can see what's happening. And while crime in and of itself may be down, the disturbing crime is up. In fact, assault arrests are up 23% in just 1 year from 2008 to 2009. Now that's the kind of crime that disturbs me. I don't want petty theft, I don't want graffiti, I don't want those things either, but I'm talking about the violent crime that impacts our community at large.
But while assault arrests are up, I think the police would agree that that does not necessarily indicate that assaults themselves are up. Their arrests are up in downtown Columbia for many things, including minors in possession of alcohol, because there's been more intensive policing in downtown. Anytime you focus more police resources and more police officers' time on a certain area, there will be more arrests, but that does not mean that there are more of the underlying crimes taking place.
You make a good point in that policing is really important. And you may have heard that the police chief had mentioned that he would like more officers, and of course he would, and I would too, but that's not a realistic thing when it comes to budgeting. A police officer is going to cost around $125,000 a year at a minimum, with salary, benefits, training, equipment, and when we're looking at these cameras, it's another tool to aid law enforcement. We're not saying it's the end-all tool, we're saying it's another tool. And one of the things that disturbs me the most is that, and I do support geographic policing, but since Adam's attack last June, our geographic policing in the downtown area is down 3 officers. 2 have been promoted and 1 was called up for active duty. It takes time to train and get officers on the street to do what they need to do. Our officers downtown are actually working at a deficit right now. There's not as many there. Cameras would aid them. They'd be there 24/7. Again, another tool to aid law enforcement.
Every time I hear that phrase, another tool for law enforcement, you can bet that that means almost every time that there's a sacrifice in civil liberties taking place. That euphemism of another tool for law enforcement almost always translates into a further erosion of personal liberty. Now, I'm intensely aware of the fact that our Supreme Court tells us we have no expectation of privacy in a public place, but I think everyone in their heart feels otherwise. We all believe we do have some right to personal privacy, even if we're out in public. And I don't want to live in a society, and I don't want Columbia to be a community where our government keeps us under constant surveillance. That's what's being proposed here. The private cameras are a different proposition, Tom. That is a fundamentally different proposal, and we're not objecting to that.